Today I want to talk about passing and privilege. Um, I am in a segment of the trans community that is passing as cis in our assigned gender, and a lot of people who aren't have less privilege because they don't have the cis passing privilege that I have. Um, and in the trans community, passing means a lot of things. Because there's kind of this dichotomy of being perceived as what you see yourself as, being perceived the way you identify, and being perceived as cis. And it's not trans people's fault, so those two ideas are conflated. They're conflated because the larger society doesn't see trans people as legitimate, so the only way to be perceived as your real gender identity is to be perceived as a cis man or cis woman, if that's how you identify. Um, so passing has this weird positive flavor, but passing in minority communities tends to also get you thought of as an outsider, or as not really being part of the group or not really experiencing the discrimination in that group, which is partially true. Um, so in the trans community, since passing for a binary person is perceived as an endpoint, a good goal, because then you're perceived as who you want to be, but passing when you're a non-binary is generally not such a good thing, unless you're passing as the opposite of your assigned gender, because otherwise you're a cis presenting, right? You're really a cis person, you look like a cis person, you get treated like a cis person, you don't face discrimination, obviously. So what are you doing identifying as trans? I find the word cis-presenting to be hurtful. I'm sure some people use it for themselves, but for me I find it really hurtful because it's a verb. It makes it sound like something I'm doing. I'm not trying to present as cis. I tried for a long time. I had my hair cut short. I bound my chest, 2 different binders that hurt, damaged the sensitivity there, really sweaty, gross, hand wash only, not good. I would wear baggy men's clothes, and I'd go out every day thinking, oh man, I look androgynous or I look masculine, surely people will notice, and then they would call me miss, they'd call me ma'am. People wouldn't even seem to think I was genderqueer at all most of the time, even with me trying as hard as I could. Eventually, I decided that not trying was easier and it hurt less to not have that expectation that I'd be recognized and then have it thrown in my face that I looked a different way. So I'm not cis-presenting on purpose. I'm just not trying to pass as something I can't pass. I'm not trying to be recognized by a society that doesn't want anything to do with transgender people or non-binaries and doesn't want to let go of its patriarchal gender assignment bullshit. So it's hard for me though because I know that I have a lot of privilege. I had a lot of privilege in the first place. I'm middle class. I got a college education. I have abilities that I'm actually both experienced as disabling, but also my neurotype also means I've been able to get a good job. I thought it would make me homeless on the street, but the same things about my mind that are hard to work with society also got me recruited for a relatively high-paying software development job right out of college, even though there's no way I could have applied for a job even. Like, that was the level of disabling that my experiences were at that time. Yet the same things about my brain translate into me getting a high-paying job. So I know privilege can be a really weird thing. But yeah, so, and then on top of all that, I go to work and people assume I'm a cis woman, and if I go to an interview for another job, my trans status doesn't have to come out. Unlike people who have transitioned, even if they're passing in day-to-day interactions, that background check, that history on all their official documents is going to come up. and that leads to poverty and severe discrimination. And if they're not passing on the street, that leads to violence. And even if they are, it leads to interpersonal violence. And hey, I have experienced interpersonal violence that may have had something to do with my identity. But yeah, I'm aware of this privilege, and I'm also aware, though, that a lot of non-binaries who are transitioning or who are obviously trans and have that ability to be read as gender ambiguous or something like that are facing even worse discrimination than a lot of binary trans people, because they have to deal with all of those same concerns of violence and workplace discrimination and poverty and medical costs and access and so on. And in addition to that, they have to contend with the fact that society has no place for them. It doesn't have a bathroom they're allowed to use, doesn't have language that can be used for them, and no one is ever going to look at them who isn't a trans-friendly person. No one is going to look at them and perceive them to be okay. Unlike binary cis people or binary trans people who can have cis passing privileges, at least in certain circumstances. So I guess I just want to say that we have these ideas of privilege, and they extend, I mean, you know, race and ability and class and all of these things are hugely important, hugely compound the picture of what privilege is, but we kind of want to argue about something that's just like cis privilege, like that's one thing, and like the trans community is defined by it, when in reality transgender is defined by you not having the gender identity and only the gender identity that was assigned to you at birth. That's all the trans community is defined by. And maybe, you know, maybe some people have transitioned and detransitioned, or in some other ways that I can't fit into a nice definition fit into the trans community. But just the fact that you have cis passing privilege, or don't have cis passing privilege, or have transitioned, haven't transitioned, that's not what being trans is about. And the whole idea of social critiques, bringing to light privilege and structures of power and hierarchies, that's not meant to make us all argue with each other and not accept each other and be mean to each other. And it's not meant to dogmatically apply a hierarchy of who's more privileged and who's less privileged, when in the reality these are just factors in how much power you have in life, and they all intersect and affect each other, and they're different for every individual, different depending on where you live, and they're also not the sum of a person. There's a lot more, and there's a lot of things that even can be expressed in terms of privilege that also can be expressed in other ways that are also important. I mean, I could talk about neurotypical privilege, or I could talk about disability rights and so on when I talk about things I've been through, but there's also a really personal level that is very unique, or maybe not unique, but doesn't need to be political all the time. So I guess I'm saying, try not to get too emotionally invested in these simplified models of what society is like that we call privilege, and try to listen to other people and realize that people with passing privilege also face discrimination, and they face the fact that they're not accepted in society, and that hurts every day. And being questioned by their own group even hurts every day. And not being able to express myself, for me, not being able to not have that cis privilege, even when I tried, that hurts. That's misgendering, it hurts. And also this constant fear that I have to regulate who knows what, and be paranoid about who can figure things out, or whether someone might read something I post online or watch this video and then my career goes down the drain or something. Those are real fears, and I can face discrimination. I do face discrimination from people I let know this information, and it also hurts not to feel fully part of the community. On the other hand, for people who don't have passing privilege, yes, I get it. Or at least I start to get it. I can kind of sort of understand a little bit. And I think people who do have passing privilege need to realize this, that if you don't have passing privilege or have, in some context, it's bad. You can be very afraid of not just someone finding out, but of violence, because there's no step of them finding out. It can go directly to violence, and of you have quite possibly really lost your job, really lost your home, maybe multiple times, really been assaulted. You face everyday bad treatment, and even if you're not facing bad treatment, you have to worry whether the bad treatment was because of how they perceived you, or whether it was just how that, the person having a bad day. And you feel like people who seem to have more privilege coming into your community is delegitimizing your experience. I understand those things, but that's not what being trans is about. It's not about the power and privilege. It's about identity. And the power and privilege are other things on top of that we just don't have the vocabulary to express yet on a level that doesn't start causing bad feelings and conflations and people kind of fighting over the same words and fighting over hurt feelings and so on. I think our language was built specifically to place people into two genders and keep them there. And we don't have all the tools to talk about trans experience in a lot of different ways, but we'll get there. And in the meantime, I think understanding and patience and acceptance and giving people the benefit of the doubt and definitely being there for anyone in our community who is facing discrimination or being hurt or needs our help. That's the important thing. All right, thanks for listening to my rat.